You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Well, that was a very curious countdown sequence. I'm not sure what happened with that one. This is Force 13 Live. We are covering the latest on Typhoon Goni, Philippine name Rolly. It's got winds estimated of 185 miles per hour, which is around 295 kilometers per hour. Sustained winds, category 5. Indications show that maybe it is intensifying again after yesterday, or I think it was at this point last time yesterday that it was at 190 miles an hour, or even, I don't even know when that was at this point. It's been crazy, this storm. It is one of the strongest typhoons that we've seen recently, and it's continuing towards the Philippines. It's pretty tiny as well. You look at the imagery on the screen, you can obviously see the close-up in our inset there, but the wide shot shows that the storm is pretty small and the eye is minuscule. My name is Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team for this hour of coverage, consisting of Ethan, Thomas, Justine, Ray, Paul, Strat, and Yuxinada. Hello to you all.
Hello.
Good morning. Morning from the Philippines.
Evenings and mornings everywhere. We've got people all around the world here. We've got our usual hurricane typhoon analysts, Ethan and Thomas, and we've also got Strat and Yuxinada on board. And in the Philippines this morning we've got Paul, Ray, and Justine. It's great to see you all here. And it sounds like morning somewhere as well, actually. Let's start with Justine, because we've not spoken to you before, but you are one of the main people on the Force 13 Philippines group. Indeed, you are the person who is in charge.
Yes, as of 5 a.m. today, next bulletin will be in a few minutes. PAGASA is saying that Rolly can be a super typhoon within the next 12 hours with a possible winds of more than 220 kilometers per hour.
So that's PAGASA's take on it, but we think it's been a super typhoon for a long time. What do you think's holding them off? Any idea?
I think that, I don't know, it's getting to the point where the waters are to become a bit unfavorable, but I also think that maybe it's the fact that it tried to have an Eyewall replacement cycle, but it backfired.
Well, it hasn't really, but I'm just curious why PAGASA are still on the low side of this.
Well, I think that, the way that PAGASA analyzes intensity is a little different from the way that we analyze intensity. My primary theory for this is that, you have a storm of this appearance, a storm of this nature, and, the main assumption that I have is that PAGASA doesn't rapidly intensify storms. I've looked in the past at their analysis, and normally you don't see huge jumps in intensity. It's just been a slow upward movement with time. So my assumption is just that they limit how much the intensity can go up on the storm each advisory.
Yes.
Now, Signal 2 warnings are in effect, as we saw on that graphic just a moment ago. There it is again, for quite a few locations. Catanduanes is obviously the first location that will receive the worst of this storm, and a fair amount of the Bicol region as well now under the Signal 2 warning. Signal 1 extending halfway up Luzon, really, as far north as into part of Isabela, I believe.
Yeah.
So obviously the situation escalating, but Thomas, do you want to speak about how the storm structure and some of the discussions that we've been having recently about its intensity and what we're thinking.
Yeah, so, this is some satellite imagery that I think does a fair job of what the storm looks like right now. Let me just pause it. You can see in the latest frames, compared to where it has been, that we're seeing some of that, those minus 80s that were right around the eye starting to warm a little bit, my bad. Starting to warm up a little bit. You'll see the really well-defined CDO that we had. Well, we still have that, but the minus 80s are getting a little shaky. We're not seeing full minus 80s around the storm anymore. So those are signs of weakening. The sign of strengthening is the eye's appearance has improved, and if I'm hearing correctly, you're saying the eye temperature is increasing at this point?
Yeah, very late info that's been coming in the last half hour. The eye was pretty stagnant at around 10 degrees Celsius, but we just had a latest of just 10 minutes ago. Well, actually, it was from an earlier time, but we found the info 10 minutes ago. It's actually from 23:10, so that's pretty much an hour ago, depicting the eye temperature back up to 19.
Yeah, and with that being said, we have a very powerful storm nonetheless. I think 185 is a perfect estimate for it right now. I think there's a possibility it's at 190. And we'll see if that does manifest itself. But with that being said, there are also rumblings of an Eyewall replacement cycle taking place here, and I think that's certainly possible. Microwave indicated that earlier today, that there was definitely a larger, more dominant Eyewall on the outer side, and that inner one was getting choked off. We'll see if that does manage to manifest itself, because we can kind of see the two rings around each other, even on infrared at this point. So I think definitely one is at least attempting to take place. Whether it will occur successfully, we'll just have to see.
We've just had a read from 23:30 as well, so that's a little bit more recent, that the eye temperature is 20 now.
Yeah, so, the eye temperature has been increasing. My estimations have had the eye temperature around 20 for a while now. And they haven't changed too much, 15 to 20. But yeah, regardless of the eye temperature, it's a very intense storm, and it's definitely something that we'll be watching. It's going to bring some pretty nasty impacts to the Philippines. It's a stage 6 on the CDPS scale right now, so definitely something to take seriously. It's a life-threatening situation.
That it certainly is.
I guess we talk a little bit semantics almost about, is a storm up to 190 miles an hour, or could it get to 195 instead of, its current intensity, for example? But it is important to note that past 160 miles an hour sustained, and we're well past that right now at around 185, which is about 300 kilometers per hour, 1 minute sustained winds. The damage difference isn't really particularly noticeable past that point. So while it's always good for conversation and shows just the pure raw energy that a storm has, even if this thing were to drop to 165, the danger level would be, still really up there at the same level, at least in regards to winds. It is quite extraordinary, I will say, to have such a change in forecast from only a couple days ago when the model consensus was a moderate tropical storm, a weak tropical storm going through the central Philippines, to now having a system that's already been a Category 5 equivalent for over 21 hours now, and will almost certainly be a Category 5 storm for at least 36 hours in total, equivalent. And a lot of that is at 180 miles an hour plus. So the rarity of this defying expectations, per se, can't really be understated.
Yep, and, well, I'll tell you one thing about this storm. It's certainly going to be bumping up the ACE number in the Western Pacific, which was severely lacking so far this year.
Definitely. Like, this storm definitely has helped that number get boosted quite substantially.
I mean, if there's any saving grace at all right now, it is a particularly small storm. I know earlier today, typhoon sustained winds only extended out, I think, at most 20 nautical miles.
And according
that's,
to
of course, going to grow a bit.
JTWC right now, they're saying the maximum tropical storm force wind field radius is only 55 nautical miles.
Yeah, so this thing is still really compact and small. So, it's fortunate that we're not seeing a situation, say like Mancut, for example, which had tropical storm force or gale force winds extending, almost 400 miles from the center and typhoon sustained winds extending, closer to 300 kilometers out from the center. But that doesn't really discount the danger this is going to bring, particularly to where it begins to interact with land. And a notable change to talk about compared to last night, even this morning, is an increasing confidence that there will be a bit more of a southward track on approach to the Philippines, which means that it's more and more likely that northern Bicol will see more significant impacts than earlier today.
Ethan, what's your take on it right now? You're also showing us some imagery there.
Well, there's been a huge flare of negative 80s over the past few hours, and that looks to be maintaining it. And I've been seeing, on my estimations, that the eye temperature has actually been holding steady around 20, 25 Celsius, maybe even getting close to 30 Celsius at some points.
Really?
At points, yes. Not
Wow.
quite getting there, though, but it's gotten close. But I think that this is a solid 190 mile an hour storm right now. I do think that it weakened down to 180 earlier, though. So.
Well, there it is again. We've got plenty of satellite views of the storm at this point. If you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air, that's what we're here for. Start your message with Force 13 all in text on our YouTube chat, and you can also send us a message where we're simulcasting on Facebook right now on Force 13 Philippines. Just search F13PH. We'll get you straight through there. So choose your desired medium. We do have some questions already. The first one is about some general advice on the storm, I think.
A lot of that's going to end up being location dependent. A lot of that comes down to the storm being smaller in size. If this were, say, the size of a Mancut, then, we'd be telling everyone across basically all of Luzon to be taking early preparatory and cautionary measures. But because it's smaller in size, some areas, particularly those that get hit exactly by the center, will see far more extreme impacts than areas even 50 miles away. And that's particularly the case. That makes it a bit more tricky when we're still 36 hours out from landfall, and there's questions on how much interaction it'll have with Bicol, whether that'll weaken it a bit more before it comes into Luzon, or if it'll try to deviate south enough to make landfall in Bicol. Regardless, though, signal 1, 2, and I think 3 warnings are about to be coming up in the Philippines now from PAGASA. And it's always important for people to have their typhoon plan in place and make sure that they're staying up to date with information from their local officials for any potential information or evacuation orders on their exact location.
What are the chances of a Category 5 landfall? We've pegged it at 44% right now. What do we think?
And a lot of that's going to come down to, does this move a bit more south and interact with Bicol a bit more? That would probably weaken it a bit below Category 5 status before coming on shore in the Philippines. But if it deviates a bit to the north, it's going to have less land interaction, and that'll give it a chance to potentially stay a Category 5 equivalent system coming on shore.
More questions then. Do we think that the HWRF's prediction for both Goni and Atsani and 96L will come true? Well, that's 3 questions in one there. First of all, what is the HWRF model saying for the 3 of them?
It wants, at least the last one I saw, it wants Raleigh here to stay incredibly intense for the next 12 hours and then drop off much more substantially, but still be incredibly powerful at landfall. And it wants 96L in the Atlantic to be a Category 4 at landfall in Central America. The odds of it being right on everything in existence right now are quite low, particularly because it is on the highest, if not higher end, of expectations for all these systems.
Yep. Paul, you've not spoken much just yet, so what's the news at your place right now?
So basically, I have mentioned last night's stream of the preparations of the storm. Basically, heavy equipments being sent to mountainous areas, and then rubber boats also being readied at the low-lying areas that are prone to flooding. And actually, there has been evacuations taking place already at the areas that will be hit by the storm. So basically, if the government issues a forced evacuation, that means even if you do not agree to be evacuated, you should be evacuated. And so there has also been um, DILG already preparing. They already released their codex maps regarding the potential impacts of the storm in from 10 miles, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers. So that codex map, they will use that actually for their relief efforts after the storm. Depending on the impact, maybe they can already send an helicopter to survey the area in aerial fashion.
Lots of questions about how strong it might get. Speculation about 200 miles per hour. Thomas, any thoughts on that? Objectively, without, I mean, some suggestions that it can't be completely ruled out.
So with a storm like this, I mean, you're at a point where you have an extremely powerful system. Regardless, we got some roosters in the background there. But we have a storm with minus 80s basically surrounding it, a really warm eye. With pinholes, it's really difficult to predict the intensity. I mean, there is a chance that it does have. If we flew a plane into it, we'd find winds over 200 miles an hour. Given current intensity estimates, the best that we could probably say is that this is at 190. Could it get to 200? MPIs would say no. The MPIs in this part of the basin right now would say no, and by the time we do get into those MPIs that would be high enough, you're starting to get into territory where shear begins to increase. The storm's generally anticipated to weaken. So could it get to 200 miles an hour? Probably. It probably could, and if this were to happen 100 times, one of them could probably do it. Will it do so? Will it manage to do so? I don't think so. I don't see this getting to 200 miles an hour. I think 195 is the ceiling. We might watch me eat my words here in a good 15, hours or so, but we'll see.
It's looking very impressive. Massive cloud tops over minus 80 degrees Celsius. There was even one or two areas that were minus 90 before we came to air in the early hours this morning. Just enormous cloud tops towards the center of the storm. Loads of questions then. Was this one of the fastest rapid intensifications? Didn't it gain almost 100 miles per hour in one day?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
Will Manila be in the eye of the storm?
Oh,
Hard to say.
hard to say because actually in the latest PAGASA track, it puts it right above Metro Manila. So probably not directly at Metro Manila, but the Eyewall is gonna actually pass by it. So a big chance that you might experience strong winds there, strong gusts.
And that's extremely bad if that actually does happen because
Yeah,
Manila
because
is huge. It has a population comparable to that of like New York City.
We've
Yeah.
got some news to break here. The 8 a.m. advisory is out and the Signal 2 warnings have been extended towards the west there into parts of Quezon now. All of Camarines there under Signal 2. No Signal 3s yet. The Signal 1 there, I'm not sure if that's extended much. I think it might have a little bit. Northern Samar and the northern part of Samar also under Signal 1 warnings. There's Barte Romblon and Mindoro in the southern extent, and in the northern extent they're up to central Isabela province.
so they still haven't upgraded it to super typhoon intensity. They're still sticking with 215 kilometers per hour. Interesting.
What's the reasoning?
It seems like they're really holding back Like they're trying hard not to actually upgrade it.
Oh, what? That.
But basically, the track still remains pretty much the same as to the 5 a.m. bulletin. So, skim past the northern tip of Metro Manila into Bulacan. So probably, chances are Manila might be raised to signal number 3, and you may experience winds there, strong gusts and strong winds, along with heavy rain.
Silla thanks us heavily for our great coverage, and everything helps towards our work here. Be getting better all the time, and hopefully the coverage is helpful, especially when people need it the most. Is there a chance that this storm will landfall at peak intensity there?
Hard to say, actually.
I would say that there is a chance, but that chance is very low.
Yeah,
Like really low. And the reason for that is because shear is going to increase a little bit with time as the storm does get closer to land. Sea surface temperatures will be just fine. Not only that, this storm is undergoing an eyewall replacement cycle right now. And with that, you can actually see that really clearly on the latest imagery. The latest rapid scan has come in, and you can really start to see those waning cloud tops around the center. I'm thinking that we're seeing those minus 80s all the way around on the outer sides now. I'm thinking that where we see these minus 70s, this could be the beginnings of where that new eye is going to end up.
And where do we go next when that happens?
Well, we could see this pulling apart attack and go crazy after that. But we'll see. I mean, Napartak
Very reassuring.
Is stark comparison. But after that, I think that the reality is the shear does begin to go up a little bit. You're going to see the core of this get more disrupted because it's already disrupted from an eyewall replacement cycle. You're going to see a little more disruption. I don't think it's going to be enough to cause significant weakening, but I think we'll see maintaining of intensity and some gradual weakening before landfall. After about the next 6 to 12 hours, I think that its intensification phase is over.
The thing is, right now, we were looking at it yesterday, and the models were saying that right now, pretty much, like the next 3 to 6 hours are the best possible conditions during its life.
Well, we're about to see if it takes advantage of those.
I suppose if it's having an eyewall replacement cycle at that point, that might be a good thing.
just literally expecting the unexpected right now on Goni.
Yep. Lots more questions. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can. What's your thoughts on almost everyone comparing Goni to Haiyan? We've had a bit of that today, haven't we?
Dear, that's, I mean, when you talk about a storm like this, comparing it to Haiyan, there's not much precedence for it, quite simply. And the reason, number one, is the storm is significantly smaller. I mean, from a meteorological perspective, this is the only real thing that's in common between this and Haiyan is the minus 80 cloud tops and the possibility of this getting to 195. Hasn't even done it, but could get there. But when it comes to the potential that this has to bring catastrophic impacts to the Philippines, don't get me wrong, it can bring really bad impacts to the Philippines. You should be preparing for this. You should be treating this like a Haiyan when it comes to your preparations. But ultimately, when the numbers are run, I don't see this being anything like Haiyan was. It's not going to be quite as strong. It's not going to be bringing in the same kind of surge. It's significantly smaller. Not as big of an area is going to get impacted. So I think that the comparisons to Haiyan are doing more harm than good. I think
this must only be about half the size of Haiyan.
Yeah, half the size.
Yeah.
But still the same power.
Yeah.
Near enough.
Yeah, just about.
Lots of questions. What is the possibility of the Fujiwara effect on Goni and Atsani?
Well, at this rate, it's quite low because Goni is going to shear Atsani to pieces and kill it within the next day or so at this rate.
Well, that's what's happened so far, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just getting sheared to pieces, man. It's not strengthening at all. We were
But
expecting at least a little bit.
after
But in the
Sunday,
longer
Goni's out of the
range,
picture, so
yes, in the longer range, Itsani could become a bigger concern for the Philippines. And again, we'll obviously be keeping an eye on that. And if it does get to the same or similar position as Goni here, we'll probably be sitting right back here.
no doubt about it. GFS going absolutely insane on Goni. Have we seen that? And a weird thing going on that after Goni peaks, it rapidly weakens 100 knots. Well, I'm not. I don't know whether you're talking about out at sea or near land. It's quite possible to weaken 100 knots pretty quickly once it makes landfall. But
I know what they're talking about. I have it up on my screen.
oh, okay. Let's have a look then.
So the GFS initializes this storm at 193 knots. It initializes it 12 hours ago at 174, and you can see these strange fluctuations. And then immediately, as soon as the run actually begins, you go exactly 100 knots lower.
Oh, right.
That's just a fluke in the model. That's not an actual prediction. That's called the GFS being one of the strangest models I've ever seen in my life.
Junk data there.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I am now looking at ECMWF and GFS runs. The two of them are actually agreeing on a Catanduanes landfall.
That's my worry, that the storm, I mean, it looks to me like it's been going southwest for a time during the early hours of today, and that's not particularly expected. And now it's sort of west-southwest after just taking a little turn just in those last few frames.
Yeah, it's definitely a concerning sight to see.
With them being impacted by Kinta, of course it's going to be worrying for them.
And you can actually see on this progression of imagery here the very outer edge of the storm reaching Catanduanes this morning.
Oh yeah.
So the storm's effects will start to be felt very soon. That's just the peripherals right now, but the main part of the storm will be felt there later today, probably the afternoon, definitely by evening. And overnight will be most likely the storm's passage. Let's see what else we've got. Will Goni regain strength after landfall in the Philippines? Suggestions that it won't gain much strength, but Vietnam's still in for potential impacts from what would be maybe a strong tropical storm or a low-end typhoon by then.
Yeah.
Indications, at least now, that it won't be as weak in the South China Sea as models were saying even yesterday.
Oh, really?
They're now expecting it to basically hold intensity through most of its track through the South China Sea and be near 55 knots or so, 50 to 55 knots when coming on shore in central Vietnam. Yesterday they were having obviously substantially weaker than that. Regardless, though, it isn't particularly likely that it'll re-strengthen back to a typhoon in the South China Sea when it likely weakens to a tropical storm strength system. That doesn't lower the rainfall threat that this could bring to Vietnam whatsoever, though. If we took a look at the total accumulated precipitation on the GFS, for example, we are looking at significant regions in the central Vietnam area that could see an additional 300 plus millimeters of rainfall on top of everything they just got from the past two storms.
Yeah, not a great situation over there for sure. Will Goni weaken before landfall? Well, we certainly hope so.
Shear's going to go up a little bit, but you're still going to have a relatively moist environment, and your ocean heat content actually is about as high as it gets in this part of the basin just before landfall. So, we'll see.
Why West Pacific get a superstorm but in October is a question we've received. Well, this is quite common, really.
Well, I mean, I think the explanation, at least to why you're seeing this kind of activity at this point in the year when the rest of the season, where you see a lot more storms, further north up, was much more constricted. It's part of what was expected this year because of how active the Atlantic's been. Typically, that means other parts of the world are suppressed. But we were also saying for several months that if you're going to see substantial activity and stronger storms, it'd be later in the year, late October or November into December, where you'd have several storms try to come through, in these lower latitude, high sea surface temperature areas, and get particularly strong while doing so, at least some of them. And that's unfortunately really what we've seen unfold over the past week and a half now, particularly with Malove and now Raleigh right here.
Which we're again looking at on the satellite imagery, which is still astounding to see when you just check in every. I mean, we look at it every few minutes, but even when you're checking in every few hours, you notice the big difference that the storm exhibits each time. As of right now, though, eye temperature around 20 degrees Celsius. Tops around it easily into the minus 80s still at this point. And actually, Ethan, if that imagery is up to date, showing maybe more consolidation again.
Perhaps. This image, the latest image, is. I'm just calculating the time here.
Oh yes.
It was just past top of this past hour, so it's about. I'm trying to think of it on the top of my head. It's about 25 or so minutes old. The latest image.
What do you think of that, Thomas?
I've been looking at it over here, and I'm seeing very similar things. I'm really starting to see a case for 190 right now. We'll see if that upgrade is ultimately needed. But, as you said, eye temperatures are increasing. The cloud tops are minus 80s. It seems to me like the storm is overall strengthening right now. And again, the only sign that this storm is going to get disrupted and may have some problems is that around the eye, some of those cloud tops are waning a bit, and I think that's as a result of the Eyewall replacement cycle this storm is currently undergoing. But in those very latest frames, you can see minus 80s making a comeback on the southern side of that Eyewall.
Exactly.
So it's bad news if you're over in the Philippines right now.
It's rather worrying.
Yes, because this storm could cause life-threatening storm surge and well, actually not storm surge necessarily, but life-threatening flooding and wind.
Do we think that Goni is expanding, including the wind field? When do you believe that Invest 96L could form, and where do we expect it to go? So we'll talk about that in a moment, but regarding Goni's potential expansion right now.
Well, if you look at DPWC, they're saying that as of their latest full update, which was based at 18Z, so this is about 6.5 hours old. They were saying at that time that the maximum extent of tropical storm force or gale force winds was 55 nautical miles, which is around 100 kilometers. That is very small for a storm of this extreme intensity. They were saying that within the next 12 hours alone from that, so by 2 p.m. Local time in the Philippines, that the largest extent would be all the way up to 120 nautical miles, so pushing up back towards 200 kilometers in size. So they're expecting this to expand quite a bit within the next 6 to 12 hours and then level off at a similar size until it comes onshore in the Philippines. So some increase in size, mostly from likely Eyewall replacement cycles, is anticipated. But regardless of that, it's still going to be a very small and compact system.
And there's another view of it right now, and the storm's general track there that Jacob's showing us on his screen. So, generally southwestward movement.
It looks really impressive. Not gonna lie.
Can this reach 195 miles per hour? I think we've established that that is a possibility. Will Goni dump as much rain as Ketsana? Well, it's not going to stall over there for ages. Oh no, that wasn't Getson. That was the one afterwards, wasn't it?
I think the general forecast right now, at least, is more regional based. 300 to 400 millimeters of rainfall, and in localized areas, especially over the mountains, could get higher amounts. 500 millimeters and above. You know, I'm not really the best cyclone historian, so I'm not going to say the comparison directly. But especially since a lot of that could be coming down in a pretty quick time frame, it's going to create substantial flash flooding and mudslide risk. So please make sure you're staying up to date with the latest information on your exact area for those rainfall totals.
Well, of course, especially places that have mountains, it's the rain rate rather than the rain total more often. It can be a problem for flash flooding.
Yeah, absolutely, because even half an inch, or I think the better way to put it would be 12 to 15 millimeters of rain can sweep a car away if it's coming down fast enough. So if you have, say, 25 millimeters an hour coming down even, that can be enough to cause very substantial problems.
Certainly can. Ray is also here as well. We haven't heard from you yet, also there in the Philippines. Do you want to provide any insight? Perhaps? I don't know. I guess not in that case. Paul, I think... oh yes, are there any questions on our Philippine stream there?
Really surprised, none. There's actually no questions there.
We must be doing well then. What will the peak of the storm be? We've got a lot. I mean, that is the main line of questioning really today by the looks of things. It's still talking about how strong the storm will get. It's still quite possible that the peak intensity of this storm hasn't been reached. It was 190 miles per hour, its wind peak in the last 24 hours. It's now 185, still extremely high. The pressure peak is still, looks like we're reaching it. 891 millibars is our latest estimate. That is an extremely low pressure. And again, I'm trying to relate it to other storms recently. I mean, something like Moranti's pressure, I think.
Yeah, although I will say, as a note in regards to the wind speed at least, or what it could reach, we're at a stage where the exact wind speed won't change damages from wind very much at least. Anything above 160 kilometers an hour, which is down closer, I think, to about 250 kilometers per hour, you're not going to see a very substantial change in the at least damages from those maximum winds. What we're looking at now more than anything else is, does it hold above that before it comes on shore? And that's going to be somewhat track dependent. If it tracks further south and has more land interaction, it could weaken more before making a full-on landfall. But we're also looking at how that could change the potential size of the system. If it gets larger, of course, the impacts will be more expansive. Rainfall totals, if it ends up bringing down more rainfall than anticipated right now, that's going to increase potential damage, especially if that occurs over a more widespread area.
Okay.
Yes. Also, well, we'll come back to this shortly, but we should talk about the Atlantic as well. So let's just take a little look here. We're trying to cover multiple subjects at once. You can see that area of interest there in the Caribbean Sea, the Eastern Caribbean. Looks like it's getting its act together. National Hurricane Center at high chance now for this.
Yeah, so it's looking like it's going to be a smaller system, and it's looking like more of a matter of when than if, unfortunately, at this point for this storm's formation. And I know that the H wharf is actually running on it right now.
Okay, let's take a look.
And yeah, let's take a look at what it says. So we start with a tropical storm forming in about 36 hours time from now, which isn't completely unrealistic given the conditions the storm's going to be under. And then we see the H wharf do H wharf things. It's intensifying it with a very small core, and you'll see it intensify things quite rapidly, 10 millibars in 3 hours there.
Oh dear.
Courtesy of the H wharf, and continued rapid deepening of the storm. And we see a Category 3 knocking on the doorstep of Honduras. and a
no.
Category 4 peak from the H-Wharf before a 125-mile-an-hour landfall in this run. Now,
That's not good.
I would like to give some consoling news, but the run before that was actually worse when it comes to where the storm went and how strong it was. It had it brushing up along the coast, bringing hurricane-force winds along the coast of Nicaragua and Honduras, and in the process, it didn't really weaken all that much. So, at least to the end of that particular run. So, yeah, overall not great news in the Atlantic. We'll see what evolves out of
Do
this.
we
The
have
H-Wharf
this?
obviously is not the only solution.
Do we have this model for Goni?
We do have the H-Wharf for Goni. The H-Wharf for Goni currently has it at about 155 knots, which is about what we have it at, 185 miles an hour, and it expects it to maintain about a 180 to 185 for 12 hours. You'll see it drops things off pretty quickly after that. In just 6 hours, you're at 130 knots, 150 miles an hour, and you have a quickly weakening storm, a Category 2.
Wow.
Before landfall. The H-Wharf weakens it pretty quickly.
Well, that's
for
optimistic.
a little bit of re-strengthening before the hit, and then it shows barely a tropical storm in the South China Sea. So that definitely is, in my opinion, like you said, an optimistic scenario. I think the more likely scenario is you have a borderline Cat 4 or 5 heading towards Luzon, and you get a 150 to 155 landfall. Unfortunately, I think that's the more realistic solution, but we'll have to see. I mean,
I don't think that final landfall will be as strong as that.
No, probably not the final one. Well, it depends on how far north it goes.
True. But
We got a
looking
little
at
bit
its
of an
current
echo.
movement, it doesn't look like it's going to be particularly far from the islands.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like it's going to be far from them at all. There is a possibility that it moves farther south, and I think PAGASA might be anticipating this, because we did see on the warning graphic earlier those signal 2s farther south of our forecasted track, at least. So, yeah, unfortunately, looks like we're definitely going to be seeing land impacts regardless.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the intensity at least, it's really a matter of, does the south shift a bit further south than expectations, and then just have more substantial land impacts on the Philippines sooner, because that would bring it into Bicol earlier, or if it deviates a bit to the north and allows it to become potentially an even stronger landfall. I do think it is important to note, at least with the HWRF, that both the storms there, with Raleigh and also 96L, are outliers compared to the rest of the consensus. Consensus, unfortunately, is that Raleigh will be significantly stronger than that when it comes onshore in the Philippines. But at least for the Atlantic as well, the other dynamical model that's very used often, the H1, also wants a very strong and small storm moving into Central America, but all the global models are saying a much weaker system for the time being.
Latest indications here on the satellite suggest that high temperature is fluctuating a bit, and I don't trust it, basically, Thomas, to push any higher than what the current estimate is, 185 miles an hour.
Well, that is reasonable. I mean, the high temperature has been fluctuating quite a bit with this. And I mean, the overall appearance of this storm's been fluctuating quite a bit. So, I don't blame you at all for that one. I think 185 is perfectly reasonable right now. And again, like you said, I mean, we are going to see this storm moving into better conditions as it nearly completes its Eyewall replacement cycle. And,
well, no, I think the better conditions are right now.
I agree.
So you think it's in its best conditions right now?
Yes.
Well, that's certainly good news, because it's not going to be able to intensify much while it's undergoing an Eyewall replacement cycle.
Because right now you've got approximately 10 knots of wind shear. 12 hours ago it was about 13 to 15. In 24 hours time it'll be 20.
Yeah.
And it will remain at 20 after that. Sea surface temperatures are maxing out round about now or in the next 6 hours, just shy of 30 degrees Celsius. Relative humidity is average, will remain so until after the landfall, and it gets a little bit better, actually. Track consensus, GFS is a notable, not an outlier as such, but I guess, well, when they're as tight-knit as this, maybe it is an outlier. Takes it further south than the other main models, and it does have a landfall in Camarines by the looks of things. And then you've got the CTCX model, which takes it through the Philippines a little bit further north, but then goes towards southern Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the South China Sea, once a storm moves into the South China Sea, it's going to be really interesting to see what the solution is. The thing is, the H-Wharf shows an extraordinary amount of weakening, and has been doing so as this storm moves through. I think most models have been showing quite a bit of weakening. The general consensus is a tropical storm heading off the coast of the Philippines, and it looks like it may be nearly dead here. 997 millibars, that's pretty close to a TD. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see this be a TD heading off the coast of the Philippines with the solutions that have been given. Something that is interesting is the H-Wharf has noted some strengthening being possible in the South China Sea before weakening upon landfall in Vietnam. My main message to people in Vietnam with this storm, regardless of intensity, it's probably going to be around 35 to 60 miles per hour. That's my realistic range with this. The biggest threat is rainfall. Over 30 inches of rain are possible according to the H-Wharf. So...
Not good.
Definitely not good, especially considering the fact that they just had Malave, and it's basically been a train of tropical cyclones dumping lots of rain in Vietnam this year.
I mean, if Otsani takes a stalling motion and then loops back to the southwest on the South China Sea, we could be seeing, as we head into the middle of next week, another storm potentially trying to approach there as well. Hopefully that doesn't happen. They've been getting absolutely battered lately. In the Western Pacific, at least, we had that historically quiet July, the first one without any systems in over 130 years. Since then, we've had a barrage of 3 storms in, I think, 2.5 weeks impact the Korean Peninsula, and now we're having a train of storms come through the Philippines and into Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
As we look back at the satellite imagery once again, an enormous, powerful core inside that storm. I think it's visible for everyone to see. And it's drawing ever closer. So reminder, signal 2 warnings in effect for significant parts of Luzon now. Catanduanes first of all, and then pretty much all of the Bicol region and part of Quezon, and then signal 1 warnings for various locations as far north as Isabela, including Metro Manila, and down to half of Samar as well.
And I mean, speaking of that as well, just managed to get this in the chat right now. The JMA has gone with a substantially further south track than even the JTWC, actually. They're
Really?
trying to say it could make landfall in Bicol.
So I guess GFS and ECMWFR actually write some sort, but as you can see here in the JMA track, the new JMA track, it actually puts it dead center at Metro Manila, which is really worrying.
This would be a very different scenario if that came. That's obviously far different from just the JTWC even.
Yeah.
Both of them take it very close to Metro Manila, so I mean at this point it is more likely than not that Manila proper and the metro area get some substantial impacts. At least gale force winds we're looking more and more at. But if that JMA track is right, and I'm not sure if anyone can pull it up on the stream really quick, you could see a weaker storm, at least in winds at that point, but a bit further south of the JTWC track, at that point in time when going past Manila would mean that the northern half of the system could potentially impact the city proper and the metro area, which would bring more adverse impacts than if they were to get impacted by the southern side. I will say in particular, though, that such a track like this is definitely not something to count out with the southward shifts we've seen today. And with how we've been caught off guard with landfalling storms in the Philippines this year, making last second unexpected landfall shifts. I think our May storm was probably the best example of that. Everyone was expecting a much further north landfall, and then it came on shore in Samar.
Vong Fong.
Definitely something to keep an eye out for. Yeah, Vong Fong. Even though this is a very small system, everyone in northern Bicol and in Luzon should be watching this very closely, making sure that they're taking early preparatory and precautionary measures ahead of its approach.
What worries me the most is the scenario that GMA has in their track, a Catanduanes landfall. Then skimming to the... Oh my god.
I do have some bigger news here that came in from an objective intensity analysis. ADT has just made a big upgrade. They've been lingering around 160 to 165 miles an hour for the last few hours. Now, 185 miles per hour, 160 knots, is what the ADT is calling.
We've got some breaking news from the ATCF. Joint Typhoon Warning Center have upgraded the system to 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 895 millibars.
Oh, wow.
Oh, on par with Yolanda in terms of pressure.
According to them, but I mean, we personally have it much more intense than that, Haiyan, Yolanda, in our analysis, but that's by the by. This one we've got down at 891 millibars at this time, but still, nonetheless, it's an extremely destructive, powerful storm. Well, we expect it will be destructive. Of course, it hasn't caused any just yet, but unless the storm weakens substantially, unfortunately, that's going to be the case. And we've seen quite a few of those scenarios, but it would appear that this storm will probably be a borderline Category 5 when it first strikes land.
We actually have a question in the Philippines stream. What is the forecast track of tropical depression at Sunny?
Yes, well, the JMA, I don't have that graphic with me right now, but the JMA are expecting that eventually it will, or is it? Oh, I'm not sure exactly what they're saying, but the JTWC have it curving in towards Luzon on day 4 and 5.
Yeah,
JMA also.
Yeah, they don't have it at Luzon yet. I just posted that graphic in the output room if anyone wants to pull it up on the stream very quickly.
And also,
Paul there with the JMA. They are very similar in this, at least though. That it's going to be weaker at least than they were saying yesterday. So they're saying Category 2 equivalent near 90 knots, which is closer to 160 kilometers per hour, a little above that. But that it's instead of heading north or northwest towards Taiwan, that it's also going to try to take a southwest bend towards Luzon. So once this storm passes right now with Raleigh, very likely that we could end up potentially having another system to keep our eye on.
Okay.
That's already the case, indeed. 2 storms that are active. Well, Atsani is merely a depression at this point. Probably would have been stronger if it wasn't in Goni's shadow. See if we can take some more questions. We'll be finishing up in about 6 or 7 minutes. We will still have coverage on our Philippine Facebook page. Search F13PH, F13PH on Facebook for that, and of course on our YouTube channel with more regular updates. I think Ethan's on for another one in 2 hours. Is that right?
Currently in the process of working on it.
Alright, so we'll be covering this storm extremely closely, as you would expect. We're also live in the evening, 8 p.m. once again this evening in the Philippines. That's 8 a.m. on the US East Coast. Another live event. But in any case, here's another question. Is this will this be the same track as Milenio or Ramason?
Probably not.
Definitely not Ramazan.
Which one? 2014 Ramazan?
I assume.
No, this is probably going to be different. The main differences right now are that its starting latitude, where it is right now, is substantially further north. It's likely going to be moving west-southwest or west now, it seems, maybe to the west-northwest when it's coming into the Philippines. Rasmussen was moving much more west-northwest at that point. And afterwards, the system is forecast to stay weaker and not really re-strengthen the South China Sea and move into Vietnam. Rasmussen came and, of course, intensified very quickly before making landfall in China.
Visible satellite imagery right now is very captivating, but in terms of structure, what's going on right now? We've got some high cloud tops on the northern side, but still what looks like maybe some upheaval towards the center. It's hard to tell.
I mean, we're definitely seeing waning near the center. And the reason that we're seeing waning towards the center of the storm is because this is undergoing an eyewall replacement cycle. Microwave made that clear a few hours ago. There's definitely an outer and an inner eyewall right now. We'll see. There is, and this is my biggest hope with this, there is a hope, a small hope, but a hope that because you have such a powerful inner eyewall, the outer eyewall and inner eyewall fight with each other so much that they both destroy themselves in the process of the cycle, and you just get a disheveled mess heading towards the Philippines. Which could result in that Category 2 or 3 storm that the H-Wharf is anticipating.
It's doing
really
that classic oscillating pattern right now as well in its movement. Like a coil.
Although it does look like we're seeing a much more defined path to the west-southwest now compared to the more westerly direction that we're seeing during most of the overnight hours local time for the Philippines. I would like to note as well, with the JMA track update on their forecast, if that scenario were to unfold and you see a more direct landfall in Bicol rather than just increased land interaction and then a landfall more in southern Luzon, it is possible to have the storm not weaken as much before landfall just because it'd be making landfall sooner with less land disruption. So that is something to keep in mind if that scenario comes true.
So to reiterate, warnings once again, for as of 8 AM, PAGASA extended some Signal 2 warnings. There aren't any Signal 3 warnings yet, but the first place to get it no doubt would be Catanduanes. Signal 2 extending westward to central Quezon, and Signal 1 for quite a vast area at this point. You can see it all depicted on the map graphic there on the right hand side, and they'll be updating. I'm guessing they're doing 3 hourly updates now.
Yeah. FSGRs. The next one will be at 11 p.m. 11 a.m. I mean.
Remarkable, they still have it at 215 kilometers per hour, though. We think it's much stronger than that.
Are they trying to say 10 minutes sustained for that, or 1 minute sustained, though?
10 minute.
Okay.
Still
much
low.
like JME. Yeah.
I mean, even so, even if they're saying that, and if that were the case, it would still be an extraordinarily dangerous system that anyone potentially in the path of it should not be taking lightly whatsoever. We already have Signal 2 warnings in place for parts of Bicol. Those probably extend into Luzon soon, and we'll very likely see Signal 3 and 4 warnings come up in the near future. Based on its current intensity, you would expect Signal 5 if they bumped it up to Super Typhoon status at PAGASA as well. That just really shows the widespread danger this brings to land areas that it's going to end up impacting, and that really means anyone now, at least from some of the new track forecasts from the JMA, in Bicol all the way up through central into northern Luzon, need to be making sure they have a plan in place, are taking actions to prepare now and stay safe. It's always important with the pandemic around to make sure that you're planning extra in advance in case you need to evacuate somewhere, that you're planning ahead of time so that you can stay as safe as possible health-wise, as well as safety from the typhoon as well, and make sure you're staying up to date with local officials for your exact location.
So there we have it. That's our hour of coverage, and we'll be signing off in just a moment. But we're not leaving you. We will have plenty more coverage on our YouTube channel on Force 13, and as I said earlier, on our Facebook page. We have our main page, Force 13, and what is most relevant right now, the Philippine team's Facebook page, F13PH. You can also chat in real time with our team and with our community on Discord, discord.gg/Force13 for live chat. But in the meantime, we're going to be finishing up here. Our next live stream will be again at 8 p.m. Philippine time this evening. So that's 11 hours from this time right now. Pretty consistent schedule, and Ethan's got an update coming up at about 11 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock? Okay. So that's coming up pretty soon.
Should be out in about an hour.
Any final comments?
So everyone stay safe, and as usual, always heed the warnings of your local authorities.
That about sums it up, I suppose. Thanks for tuning in. We are doing our best with this storm, even if it is one step ahead of us by the looks of things. 185 miles an hour, maybe even pushing 190. A very dangerous storm. Make sure you stay well informed on this. It is coming. Expected to strike Saturday night into Sunday morning. So now is absolutely the time to finish your preparations. See you again soon.